Permaculture. What is it? In this video, I'd like to bring some clarity to what permaculture is and how it fits in our world today. Hold on for a bit of a ride because this dude is quantum. Permaculture, the term, was coined by the Australian researcher, author, scientist, and biologist Bill Mollison. The term permaculture is a combination of the phrases permanent agriculture and permanent culture. In practice, it is a design methodology for creating sustainable solutions to real-world problems by mimicking natural ecosystems. Permaculture is a system of intentional design, integrating food, natural, and human systems in a seamless fashion. In the pre-modern era, humans existed in a much more integrated relationship with nature, and there were far less of us, so our impact on nature was less destructive to the homeostasis of Gaia, Earth. To understand permaculture more in depth, we need a bit of context around the present moment and the period leading up to it, called modernity. Modernity is a time period associated with individual subjectivity, scientific explanation and rationalization, a decline in emphasis on religious worldview, the emergence of bureaucracies, the rise of the nation state, and accelerated financial exchange and communication. All taking place in the last few hundred years, which in the unfoldment of the cosmos is merely the blink of an eye. Modernity has been a certain type of global expansion. The population blossomed very rapidly. At the time of Socrates, over 2,200 years ago, less than 200 million people occupied Earth. That's half the population of the United States. In the 2,000 years since that, up until 1800 AD, the population of the Earth multiplied rather steadily by 5 times to around 1 billion people. Only 200 years later, with all the changes modernity brought, we're pushing the envelope to 8 billion people. That's an 8-fold increase in 1/5 the time. Innovation in healthcare, well-being, and communication technologies has also brought us from the dark ages to a period of hyperconnectivity. The globe has become a sort of brain or neural network with nearly 8 billion neurons. While I'd like to go on a tangent about how technology is not the only way humans can communicate long distance, namely through the ether, as Nikola Tesla, myself, and countless other mystics knew and know very well, I'll leave that for another video on the ethical use of technology in an evolved society. One of the most prolific thinkers of our time, Ken Wilber, defines modernity as a separation of aesthetic, how things look, morals, right and wrong, and science. Landscaping in human developments is a classic example of this separation. It generally overemphasizes a certain perspective of aesthetic, which I call the Palace of Versailles aesthetic. This curated aesthetic, with an overabundance of grass and plants specifically chosen for their look and rarely for their value in terms of ecological function or human needs, has been reinforced by clever marketing for decades to the point where most people don't realize it's incongruent with the way of nature. Don't get me wrong, I love a soft bed of grass to play on, but in all matters of the cosmos, balance is key. All too often, landscapers pour poison on a piece of land to eliminate a non-desirable because the way it looks. And according to a certain aesthetic, when that same plant has an important ecological function. Like sweet white clover, which is a nitrogen-fixing legume, and considered a valuable honey plant and source of nectar. Anyways, today's agriculture has gone a different route. While it engenders a different form of aesthetic, that of rolling hills of wheat, think that scene from The Gladiator, or a horizon covered in tall green corn stalks. Industrial agriculture engenders a certain idea of aesthetic in line with monocropping and square fields, but its more concerning overemphasis has been on a specific scientific perspective, namely a perspective that overemphasizes germ theory, leading to the spraying of biocides around the globe. One could argue this has been useful up to a point for the blooming or rapid increase of the population, which I can see that argument for sure. But practices have been degraded to the point where the quality and variety of foods has decreased dramatically in less than 100 years. This is largely due to the repetitive tilling and spraying of biocides degrading the nutrient content of soils by killing the soil biome repeatedly over and over. Did you know 1 teaspoon of healthy soil has more organisms than there are people in the world? Healthy soil contains bacteria, microbes, mycelium, soil animals like worms, nematodes, arthropods, mites, millipedes, grubs. These systems, tiny as they may be, ensure that all the proper nutrients make it into our food and our bellies. Not only do those biocides kill the soil biome, they get into our food, which is frankly not good. The compaction and erosion of topsoils caused by repetitive tilling is another main contributing factor to the degradation of our soils, and therefore the food that goes in our bellies. Lastly, fermentation is something that is generally lacking, but starting to increase again. This is the reason bread 200 years ago was generally far higher in fiber, proteins, and fats. Also, practices like centralized fermentation, which the cacao industry is notorious for, so that they can keep power from the farmers, massively decreases nutrient contents. If you've ever had good chocolate, you know how not good 99% of the chocolate for sale in America is. That said, I met a guy named Ira who sources regenerative cacao from the rainforest, and he's helped the farmers set up on-site fermentation. The highest percent fat content they've gotten so far is 64%. Holy crap. The company is Cholaka. I'll put a link in the description, and I am not sponsored by them. I just think what they're doing is awesome. One task at hand, moving into the future, is to integrate aesthetic, morals, and science. There's 3 things to consider here. First, people have different views of aesthetic. Some like that natural forest vibe, it's a little messy, and some want it curated and beautiful like the Palace of Versailles concept I mentioned earlier, and that's okay. Both of these are very doable and can be created with full consideration of the scientific and moral aspects. I view the difference between a curated landscape and a natural landscape as a spectrum on which many types of designs can manifest. Second, when we take the science into consideration, we must recognize that the germ theory approach, of which our large multinational corporations and organizations are deeply entrenched, is ineffective in creating any sort of long-term sustainable food and ecosystems. While these entities advocate the continuation of these practices, namely spraying biocides and optimizing monocultures, they are neither scientifically intelligent or morally sound practices, at this point in time anyways. Science is about experimentation. Those in the field of permaculture and disciplines in and surrounding it, like biodynamics, have experimented and proven the sustainability and scalability of organic systems that use no synthetic additives to stave off bugs, fungus, etc. Why is this? Well, because natural systems balance themselves out given time, but also because a number of organic methods have been developed to build soil resilience. Most notably, indigenous microorganisms, of which liquid IMOs, or indigenous microorganisms, have been scaled successfully on an 800-acre macadamia nut farm in Hawaii, doubling the farmers' profits, making the farm organic certified, and allowing them to hire another employee. I'll put a link to that video in the description as well. Other organic methods are fermented plant juice sprays from Korean National Farming, compost teas, biodynamic corn fertilizers, and just good old-fashioned time bringing balance to a perennial-based polyculture system. In truth, overemphasizing germ theory and underemphasizing terrain theory, which manifests as spraying biocides, contaminating much of the planet's soil and waterways, has created a worldwide epidemic of nutrient-deficient and compacted soils, as well as innumerable issues related to the waterways. Because tilling leads to erosion during rainfall, which leads to biocides in the waterways. No-till or perennial-based systems lead to mycelial growth and water absorption. To not recognize that these practices are at the very least outdated is nothing less than cognitive dissonance around the legacy of the military-industrial complex. Now, I say this in the heart of our military-industrial complex, with several bases surrounding me. Just about everyone is in some way connected to it, whether it be their line of work or maybe just their consumer choices. The bottom line is, it's time to take ownership and move on to the methods that have been tested and proven, developed in and around permaculture and regeneration. For more on the split between germ and terrain theory and its effects on nature, society, its institutions, leave a comment below and I'll address it in another video. The third thing to consider is the morality of having food systems that are so stretched out and bloated. Does it seem immoral to allow famine in parts of the Middle East and Africa because they rely on grain from Ukraine, when they could grow all the food they need right where they are? The future, which is now, will consist of food systems that create resilient and abundant communities. This means their food will be grown primarily in and around the community, in perennial-based organic systems. A common misconception about permaculture is that it's a fringe idea. This stems from the fact that our current way of life is hyper-specialized. You get a degree in this specific branch of science or engineering. You go to trade school to be an electrician. Permaculture, by its very nature, is a whole systems approach to designing and managing ecology, food systems, and human systems. What this means is, as a whole, it does not fall into the conventional contemporary mold of specialization. That said, there are many specializations one can take up within the field of permaculture. You could be a water management specialist, or maybe you know everything there is to know about hydroponics and aquaponics. This is why I recommend organizations and software that embrace the complex whole systems reality of our food, eco, and human systems, as well as the strength that comes with the majority of individuals specializing in one or a few areas. Some bodies of knowledge or practice that fall under the umbrella category of permaculture are regenerative agriculture, holistic grazing and land management, food forests and agroforestry, biodynamics, Korean natural farming, syntropic farming, settlement design, and many more. Permaculture has three main ethics: people care, planet care, and fair share. People care is to take care of yourself and then move outward to caring for your family and community. Planet care is caring for Gaia, the planet or being, depending on your perspective, that we all live upon. As we are an extension of Gaia, taking care of her is equally as important as taking care of ourselves, especially with nearly 8 billion mouths to feed. Also, side note, military-industrial complex. What up, Apaches? Lastly, fair share is the idea that you give away your excess if you wish, or you sell it if it's how you make your living. Permaculture, a permanent agriculture, combining the best of indigenous practices, modern science, and technological innovation, is the way of the future. And the future is now. I hope that helped you understand permaculture a little better. I look forward to seeing you in my next video.